Budget 2010 brought to you by Harith Fund Managers.
The Finance Minister did say, although there were no changes on the personal tax front this time around, except for the 6.5 billion rand relief in the lower income brackets, that taxes are going to rise in the future. That sounds relatively ominous, George.
It does. I'm not quite sure what he meant, because if you were going to raise taxes, surely this would be the time now, although maybe he's being a bit sensitive to the growth environment. But certainly with a budget deficit this high, maybe you would have favoured him to move sooner rather than later. Nevertheless, I'm not quite sure if he means a physical increase in the tax rate, or if it just simply means that the tax burden is going to rise if they don't, for example, keep up with bracket creep. Either way, I would prefer to go the opposite direction. I'm not in favour of raising tax burdens any more than they are right now, especially on company corporate tax. I think we need to try and entice as much investment into this country as possible.
And Pierre, how do you interpret that statement?
No, I agree with that. I think the risk is always there that tax rates might go up in future, even if it's only a bit. The bottom line is we're spending a lot more than what we're earning, the government at the moment, and somebody needs to pay that bill, and unfortunately it's future generations. Our tax rates in a global context is not high compared to developed countries, so there probably is a bit of margin to play with. But it's good that given the current economic conditions, there wasn't any changes. I'm sure the temptation might have been there under other circumstances, but it's good that we basically stayed where we were.
Andre, you mentioned that you were relieved that we didn't see that marginal tax rate at the upper income level going from 40% to 50%. Given the statement that we are going to see tax increases going down the line, do you think it'll be at that upper income level?
I think we might even be surprised about how the revenue for this year plays out. If you look at the company tax expectation into the new year, I think it's providing for growth of the order of 3 or 4%. I think that's way too little. Over the corresponding period, I think the consensus forecast for earnings recovery in the JSE is of the order of 30%. And even if there is a bit of a lag in terms of reported earnings and when companies pay that, although recent tax amendments have reduced that lag, I still think that company tax will perform better than expected at this stage. And so we might even next year begin to see that the revenue, the cyclical revenue, has recovered well enough to make any attempts to either raise the VAT rate or raise the company tax rate, which would be an absolute disaster, or for that matter the personal income tax rate, are not really necessary.
Company tax rate remains at 28%, VAT remains at 14%, but no clarity on the interest and dividend tax that former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel made reference to, the fact that it is supposed to be replacing STC. Anything on that line? Were you expecting some more clarity, or is this one not important this time around?
Well, I was expecting more clarity. I think former Minister Manuel first mentioned in his 2006 budget, if memory, or maybe it was the 7, and then kept on saying, you know, it's a process. They've got to renegotiate tax treaties and the like, etc. So really they haven't got to it yet. And the last we heard was in Trevor Manuel's budget speech of last year, the last one he delivered, where he said implementation will be second half of 2010. Now, we know largely how it's going to work, but I think still just an update, just to say it is on track or it isn't on track, whichever the case may be, certainly was something I was looking for. What I do notice, they still refer, because the new tax law will form part of the dividends you receive, will be part of the interest you receive, and they're now called as interest and dividend income. So they're still using the terminology, but no new news, which I was disappointing. Labour
law reform a big focus in this budget, and specifically at the youth, school leavers, companies being encouraged and being given incentives to hire younger people. A positive move all round?
Yeah, I would say that does sound positive. I'd like to see a little more detail on that, but certainly that does sound positive. I think it's a step in the right direction to try and upskill the youth so that they can contribute meaningfully towards service delivery and the like going forward. So yes, I think that's a nice addition. I think that's a creative way of going about it, which I would give the thumbs up to.
Let's review. We've got about 4 minutes till the end of the show, and highlights. So let's look at highlights from each of you. The takeaway from Budget 2010, in your opinion, and Pierre, were you going to firmly start with you on this one?
I think the highlight is generally that the course has been maintained. You know, that there's consistency with previous ministers' budget, and also with the medium-term budget of October, and also with the President's State of the Nation address. So it's good that there's consistency. It's good that there's no weird ideas like pegging the rand or changing the inflation rate band, things that could have spooked international investors. So I think the reaction of the market and the rand is also confirmation that international investors would like this budget. Andre,
a summary of your thoughts in Cape Town?
I broadly agree with the previous comments. Relief that the macro policy in essence seems like it'll be maintained. From a fiscal point of view, I'm relieved that the Minister has taken the first steps towards bringing what is currently an unsustainable deficit back into more controlled levels.
Simon, let's look at the budget and also your thoughts on the impact on the market from this point onwards.
Well, that would have been my highlight. Just made a note here, is that it was boring and that the budget had largely the rand aside, and that was for political worries we had in terms of inflation targeting and pegging, that the market ignored it, and that's what you want. You want politicians to do their stuff without impacting markets, and that's what we want to see.
But boring is good news, as you say, for the market. That's what we want.
And that's it. When the market just ignores it. For the first 35 minutes, the market did nothing. Then it rallied 100 points. But by that time, it was something else which caused them to move. And that, to me, is a highlight. Another budget that the market can just go ho-hum. No disrespect to Minister Gordon.
Was there ever any threat that the new finance minister was going to blow us out of the water with this one?
Short answer, no, because it would have been such a massive turnaround in everything that's happened in this government since 1994. I think that, in truth, was there a threat that Praveen Gordon would come up with something completely crazy, completely left field? Short answer, no. But there's always that nerves, and some of the nerves that get hyped up. But in truth, I don't think so.
George, 2 minutes till the end of the show, so you can give us a lengthy summation of your highlight thoughts on Budget 2010.
Yeah, well, I think the three previous speakers have summed that all up quite nicely. If there was something that I would add to that, and it may be premature, I'm waiting for tomorrow's document to see whether or not it's true or not, but I get the sense that they are starting to incorporate the fiscal aspect of government together with an industrial policy plan. You mentioned the issue on labour reform, education, spending, that sort of thing. I think that speaks directly to a foundation for an industrial policy, and from that perspective I would say that's also another positive highlight, if that is the right interpretation. I suspect it is at this stage of the game, so it's good to see that the policies are starting to talk to each other now. That there's been stability, absolutely. I'm all for that. Again, I would have liked to have seen a bit more in the way of controlling of expenditure. I still think that there's not enough being done on that front. I think there's a lot of wasted expenditure. In fact, Minister Gordon mentioned it briefly. He spoke about the efficiencies at SARS, and I think he hinted at a number of other ministries trying to improve their efficiencies to some degree. So I would like to see that come through in a stronger tone in the future. I think there's a lot of spare capacity there that could be gradually fed into the fiscus and ease the pressure on taxpayers.